Hey there, welcome to saas.unbound, brought to you by saas Group. I'm your host, Anna Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. And today with me is Dean McPherson, co-founder at Paperform, a flexible online form builder, and Double, automatic step-by-step guide creator. Both companies are completely bootstrapped and run by Dean and his wife, Diony. So kind of a family business, and I'm very excited to learn everything about it, how you're making it happen with your wife. So great to see you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Sure. Well, I guess let's first start with your background and how you got here in the first place.
Sure. So how far back do you want me to go?
Not too far.
Well, like you mentioned, I run Paperform and Double with my wife, Diony. We were married. I was around 27 or so when we started Paperform. So this was coming up on 7 years ago. I was working as a programmer for another startup, and Diony was working it was kind of like a project management role at Google Arts and Culture here in Sydney. And we're both pretty sick of working for other people, and had this crazy idea of what would it look like if we started a software company, put a product up online and hopefully make enough money to pay the bills and work from home with just the two of us. And that was really the dream when we first started Paperform was, hey, maybe somebody will pay us enough money that we can not work for other people and we can own something ourselves. Yeah, so that was the beginning of Paperform, mid 2016.
Okay. All right. That's a great idea. Let's just not work for people. Let's start something. So where did the inspiration come from? Paperform, not just anything?
Yeah. So Paperform was a couple of years, I think, coming together in the background. So my first job out of university, so I'm not a technical by study. I'm an undergrad in music and philosophy.
Okay. And that's a big
graduated
change.
and needed to get a job. So talked myself into a junior web development role. But at the company that my first job was at we made forms essentially for like local government, small to medium enterprise. We were a services-based company, and really we're in a space that was called enterprise mobility, which is just really forms for mobile devices. So this was like, 2012, maybe 2013. So like iPhone 2 era.
Okay.
And now, our entire business was essentially going into any business that had a remote workforce, in terms of a workforce that was actually out in the field somewhere, that was still, taking down notes on paper, doing reports, doing audits, that kind of thing. We would go in and we'd transform all those processes to digital forms that you would fill out on a mobile device or an iPad, and then integrate with all those backend systems. So anyway, I was working in the form space, but really the other end of the form space, which is, very kind of business focused, very enterprisey. But while I was working there, I had a friend come to me and he asked me he knew I made forms, but he wasn't a programmer. And he runs a week-long kids program in the school holidays here in Sydney. And he'd been running it for 5 or 6 years before he came to me. But he asked me to make a registration form for it or to find him something that he could just buy off the shelf and use. So when he asked me to do that, I went and looked at all the popular form builders in the market, and he had a really specific set of requirements where they needed to capture quite a fair bit of information. So if you're registering kids for this program, then you need to ask parent guardian information, dietary requirements, add some medication, 20 or 30 questions per child. Parents would like to send multiple children, so they had this requirement of can we capture multiple children at the same time? And the form needed to take payments, because that was really the big process. Before this, it was quite similar to the work I was actually doing in my day job, where it was taking registrations with people would fill out a piece of paper and they'd pay cash. And that worked fine when there were like 20 or 30 kids, but the program had scaled to, they had like 150 kids every time they ran that. And that just became this administrational nightmare where people would forget to pay cash, they wouldn't pay enough, they'd pay too much, need to track everything and then write it all up and put it in a spreadsheet at the end of the day so you can actually run your program, know all of that information. So transforming that process into a digital form made all the sense in the world for him. But when he asked me to do that, I looked at everything that was out there and there was nothing that I really felt comfortable recommending for him. So I ended up building him just this custom form that every year he would come to me and say, hey, we're got to change the details to this event. It's called this year. We're taking this many kids. The cost has changed. We need to change the dates in the email. And inevitably, like when you do any kind of client work like that, it just, you screw something up. You get the call an hour after it's been announced and have to quickly go and fix something. But really that planted the idea in my head that while there was, 10, 20, 30 form builders in the market that were all very well established when we launched in 2016, there was nothing that I still felt personally comfortable recommending to a friend to use for this use case. All the products on the market at the time were kind of fit into one or two buckets. One was, you had kind of the Typeforms of the world that were really quite beautiful experiences, but only really good at one question at a time, survey, quiz style forms. One question at a time is a really great experience if you're only capturing 5 to 10 questions. But if you've got to capture 20 questions per child and you've got to fill that out for the 4 children in a row, and you've got 90, 100 questions, one question at a time all of a sudden is a horrible experience because you don't have any idea of where you are. You don't know when it's going to end. It's not ideal. And then on the other end, you have these legacy kind of first gen form builders that had been around since like 2006, 2007, like your Woofus and your Jot Forms and your form stacks, and they were a bit of a kitchen sink approach to form building, where they had all this functionality, but none of it was either worked the way you expected it to, or looked great, or really represented your brand well. So the idea for Paperform when we set out to build it in mid-2016 was we knew there was this really concrete use case from my friend Chris. So it was like, how can we solve that specific problem? But we also knew that there was a general problem in the marketplace where you had to really choose between, did you want your form to look good, or did you want your form to actually be able to do all the things that you need to do? So we really wanted to sit in the between there and give you both.
Okay, that's a great story. Well, we talked about this quite a lot with a few founders. You kind of take this unsexy business problem that's not very, it doesn't come on top of your head like kind of immediately when you think about a possible profitable business, and just make it happen, make it beautiful, and just bring the best experience out there. But it's one thing, as we all know, to build a product. It's a totally different one to sell it, right? To find a market. And you had your first trial customer and he was happy. How did it go from there? How did you become what Paperform is now?
That's a great question. So we actually launched, we ran an AppSumo deal. So, we built this early version of the product. We're both still working full time. I put it up on beta list just to see if anybody wanted to use it at all. And we had like 200 or 300 beta users sign up and kick the tires of the product. It wasn't particularly useful in terms of like formal beta feedback, because the kind of people that sign up on a site like beta list aren't really, well, they're probably not your target customer. They're not the kind of person that actually wants to use that product in their business. So we got a lot of general, not particularly useful feedback. But through that, AppSumo saw us and reached out and said, hey, we really like what you're building. It's a general business tool, so it really sits in their lane of things that are going to be generally desirable for people to buy in a lifetime deal. But anyway, they reached out and said, we think it would do really, really well. Would you be interested in running a lifetime deal? And we hadn't done any sales at all on Paperform at all. So we were like, this is actually a really fantastic way for us to launch the business. We'll either sell lots and it proves that, maybe we've got a business here, or it'll just flop and we'll continue with our day jobs. So December 2016 could happen. Well, you don't know. When you're launching your first business, you've put some code you've written on your 13-inch MacBook Air up on the internet and said, hey, does anybody want to try this out? And you don't know if anybody's going to buy it.
There be silence.
There'll just be silence. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So end of 2016, we launched on AppSumo. We actually launched on Product Hunt at the same time. Somebody who bought the AppSumo deal listed us without telling us. So we ended up having this quite a big push in early December 2016, where all of this noise happened all of a sudden, and we ended up selling close to 3,000 lifetime deals, which gave us the cash that we needed to really bridge the gap between where our MRR was hopefully going to grow to, and we needed to live. So the AppSumo deal was kind of like our seed funding, and also gave us people in the product.
Okay, so that was fast. How long did it take to go from that one initial customer to 3,000 lifetime deals?
So we launched in 2 weeks. We sold 3,000 lifetime deals.
Okay.
Or something. Like they were really short campaigns back then, so it was like a 2 week fixed campaign. And we went from no paid customers to from 300 beta customers who'd signed up from beta list to all these people in the product screaming at us to fix things and make things better and add features and great way to launch a business.
Right. Okay, that's a great story, I think. Okay, you got this swarm of people trying your product and paying for it, and obviously wanting something from you because, well, there are so many cases of using your product. Um, how did you start navigating from there? Because I think the roadmap building is something that a lot of founders are struggling with. Like, who do you listen to? There is a bit of a bigger customer, maybe then he is the boss. We need to build for him first, or then we have such a scope of smaller customers, then it wouldn't make sense for them. So how to navigate this, how to balance your customers' desires and your personal vision of the product. How did you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the things I think we actually we lucked our way into a little bit. So because we started out with these ambitions of we just wanted to pay the bills, we explicitly targeted, I suppose, the small to medium business market. We weren't interested in any enterprise businesses really up until the last year or two. We've just told businesses that get over a certain size, that have a certain set of requirements, just to go away. But what that meant was that we had this. There was some customers are more valuable than others in terms of feedback. There was all of these customers, but really in that first year of after launch, we'd added all of these users, and it was actually really, really easy to prioritize what needed to be done because we're in an existing market where people were generally moving from another form builder. They have actually really strong ideas about what they need out of the product. And one of the fun things about that deal community is they're very vocal about what they want. It can be a bad thing if you're not used to negative feedback and if you're not used to people pushing to get their way, but it can be actually a really valuable thing in that they don't hide behind their words and they say what they want. So prioritization for that first year was actually really easy because we launched with it was a really beautiful, usable product, but you couldn't do a whole lot with it. There was a lot of stuff missing. That was, very common table stakes for the form building market. So prioritization for the first year was just like, how many people are screaming for this thing? Let's build it in that order. But then in terms of the exact, over time, what we actually build from what gets requested changes because, when you first launch a product, there's like, it's a form building product. Can you send an email on form submission? Okay, we're going to add something around so you can send an email on form submission. That's an obvious feature to add. But then as you kind of get those obvious features out of the way, you still get those requirements coming through, but the requirements are way less defined, or people come with a really explicit description of the kind of feature that they want, but it may not necessarily fit the product. So I think that's where I suppose more the product manager work comes out of. How do you collate what those needs are and actually group them into a solution that fits both the product and solves that problem for the customer? Which I don't really have any great advice on how to do that well. I think doing support is probably the best advice I have for that, actually, because if you're abstracted away from actually talking to your customers day in, day out, then it's way harder to understand what those requirements mean and how important they are. Because a lot of people just throw out feature requests just on a whim, or they had an idea. But some people just really, really need features as well. So understanding how important it is to the customer will give you a pretty good indicator of how important it is to get it in your product.
So let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of communicating with your customers, because on one day you are kind of building your product and you're communicating with your customer, that your friend who specifically asks you for something, and then the next day you got 3,000 of them. And sometimes I feel like at a certain point of a founder's life, especially if it's a teeny tiny team, everything else stops. You just have to talk to your customers and that's it. So how did it go for you? What was kind of the ratio of time that you allocated to talking to your customers, building something, I don't know, maybe doing something on promoting the product and marketing and going to market and for finding your niche.
Yeah, absolutely. So in those early years, it was just Diony and I for the first 2 years. So it all had to be done by the two of us. The way that generally split out was Diony ended up doing a lot of, I suppose, first pass support. So she'll do all the general inquiries that come in, and then if it got too technical or she needed, yeah, to escalate it to somebody who built the product, then it would get passed over to me. So that worked out to probably be.
Can you take this? I'm just like passing you the phone.
Like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Just take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that worked out. Probably most days was probably an hour of support, something like that for me. Very early on when we first launched, we were very, and to this day, so one of the things we actually pride ourselves in is very good customer support. So we have 24/5. So through the business week, where we have somebody on all day, every day, across the world. So we have generally live first response support available. That's something we actually kind of tried to do with just Diony and I in the first little while. We ended up, when we launched, we took shifts every 3 hours in the night. We would wake up and just clear the inbox, just make sure there was nothing super urgent there. Just to make sure that because one of the funny things is, we're obviously based in Australia. So our primary market's the US, which is their business days starts at 2 a.m. here or something like that. So really just making sure that we weren't missing anything hypercritical, that we hadn't released a bug or we hadn't broken anything or anyway, that was one of the things that we tried to do a lot of early on. Obviously we couldn't hold that up indefinitely.
All right. Talk about bootstrapper mentality. Really ready to jump in there in the trenches at all times. Super cool. All right. Now you've got a couple more new products. There is Double, which is a completely new product, like a completely different, apart from Paperform. And there is PaperSign.
Yes.
So I want to ask you about. Let's maybe start with PaperSign, because we're still on Paperform, and Paperform is in a very competitive market. Like you said, when you entered it, there were quite a bit of big players already. So how did you know that there is still space for a new product? And now with PaperSign competing potentially with giants like DocuSign, same question. How did you think that, we could still make it there?
Yeah, absolutely. So PaperSign is a really interesting product for us because it's under the Paperform company, it's really it's our second product in the market. It's a completely new thing for us to try. But strategically, it really fits into a longer narrative for what we're doing at Paperform. So historically, we entered into the form building market, but Paperform has evolved into being something that's a far more general purpose tool. People use this for not just your contact form, but for event registration, client onboarding. People ended up trying to hack Paperform to do stuff like contracts. It was essentially where the idea of PaperSign came from. We have a very rudimentary PDF creation tool inside of Paperform, and people were trying to use that to generate contracts and get them legally signed. And we saw this as when people start trying to hack around the edges of your product to get a job done, it's a pretty good indicator that there might be something worth exploring there. But long term, I suppose the way we're seeing Paperform grow is really to be more of a full digital Swiss Army knife, a general automation tool that can solve a bunch of use cases in your business. So Paperform, PaperSign, and then some more products down the line are really the building blocks of a platform. So in some ways, we think about PaperSign as, yes, we are bringing in a new e-signature tool, which is entering into this very competitive space. But it's actually, its value prop in the long run is that it's a part of this ecosystem. That doesn't mean it doesn't compete by itself. We've built a very, very good tool that does the job very well, and we think is worth merit completely by itself to sign up and use. But in some ways, if it doesn't take off and be the next DocuSign, that doesn't particularly matter to us, because really it's just a building block in the long-term strategy.
So there are more products coming. Is that an announcement that we're making here? Okay,
Probably more
perfect.
price coming. It'll be a little while.
Okay, all right. Excited to see what you're building next. All right, then let's talk Double. So that's the third product so far.
Yeah.
Um, so what is Double? Can you talk a little bit about it? And again, where did the inspiration come from, and how does it fit in the Paperform universe or outside of it?
Yes. So Double is not inside the Paperform universe at all. Double started uh, around the beginning of last year, I think. So we'd worked to this stage. We'd ended up hiring, as the company's grown, I started as the sole developer, and we've ended up growing a very fantastic technical team. And because I'm, a founder and I have founder responsibilities, we now formally co-CEO, my wife and I, and that just means that I often just get pulled in very crazy different directions, and it means that no core business processes should really depend on me. Otherwise, everything could just,
Yeah.
you know, come to a stop all the time. And what that looks like from the technical side is that I try not to get in the way of the technical team by being on the tools too much. And because, if they're waiting on me to review some code or to finish a piece of work, then things might just stop. What that meant was that we'd grown a team and I was kind of missing programming. So Double really just started as I just wanted to build something. Just that was like low stakes. It wasn't going to affect our core product, wasn't going to affect our core business. I nearly didn't even release it to anybody. I built it on a whim of this might be something that we would find handy internally at Paperform. But then once you've built a product and it's sitting there, you kind of have to release it. So it's been this this constant journey of like started as a side coding project, which kind of became a side business, and now is just sitting in that state of I'm still working on it when I have the mental space to work on it, but Paperform's still the primary focus.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we were just at this technical conference in Hamburg, Code Talks, and that was one of the topics in one of the talks. How at a lot of times coders actually don't release the product because they think it's not good enough, because it's not maybe ready, it's not pixel perfect or anything like this. So a lot of products, a lot of projects are dumped and never see the light of day and never become a company. So do you maybe have anything to say to the coders, to the developers about that? What does it take to take product to the next level, to make it a business, to show it to somebody and just get going?
Yeah, look, I think you have to ship it. Like, there's no way around, shipping it. I mean, there's so much early startup advice around just getting your product live, even talking about your product before you've built it. The sooner you can get into customers' minds, the better. The longer you build something in the dark without anybody touching it, the more likely that when you release it, nobody's actually going to care because you're going to have built something which nobody wants. So actually just releasing, tell somebody on Twitter. It can be as simple as that. Just start talking about it, start shipping it out. And then I suppose going from product to business is quite a transition. There's a lot of resources out there, but I think, yeah, it's something I think about a lot, especially with the more programmers I work with on a day-to-day basis. There's like you have to want to be more than just a on the tools coder as well, because founder life isn't making things all the time. You don't just spend 8 hours a day coding. And if that's what you want to do, you're probably better off just having a nice job, because there's plenty of those around for competent people who know how to make things. But the rest of it's really fun as well, if you're willing to take the leap.
Right. Okay. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's talk about your personal dynamic in the company, because this is also something that we talk a lot at SaaS Group, because we talk to founders, and at a lot of times founders also CTO, they are coding. At times when we get to technical due diligence, we see that, you're not clearly a CTO, you're not clearly a CEO, but you're just kind of micromanaging everything. And well, whatever falls onto your developers, that's what they're doing. But you're the kind of the main star of the show. So as far as I understand, you are trying to make yourself obsolete. You try to delegate a lot to your team and empower them to act on their own. And again, I wanted to ask how you're doing it, how you're structuring your work with the team, how big is the team, and what is the strategy there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I think it really, at least for me, it really ebbs and flows. It kind of comes and goes about how on the tools I am, how involved I am with what's getting shipped on a day-to-day basis, which is probably just speaks more about me than my team. So dev team, at product team, we're about four or five including me, four devs. But from early on, so like 2019, our first employee, just about our first employee, was my brother-in-law, who's a developer, he's now our dev lead. So he's really stepped into that kind of team management, timelines. What are we shipping? When are we shipping? Is everything spec'd correctly? Management role, which is something that I'm not particularly suited for. I'm not well skilled at that, and he's fantastic at it. So my real role in Paperform product now is really strategy, and then I'll comment on execution. So I'll make sure particularly that we're making things feel like our products, that we're paying attention to UX, and we're not just shipping the first draft of something that gets out, and making sure the quality bar is exactly where it needs to be. But that being said, there are still times, PaperSign, for example, we're launching a whole new product. I was heavily involved in making sure that went out. I was on the tools, making sure that that represented our brand very well, because that's our first whole new product in the market. But then on day to day, outside of that, then there might be weeks where I barely have any interaction with the dev team at all. So when we're in business as usual mode, then I think we've done a pretty good job at that. In terms of how to do that, I think you just need to find somebody who you trust to do that well, which is hard.
Yeah,
it's hard to find somebody, especially if it's your first business and it's your baby a little bit, and you need to be able to appreciate others for the skills that they bring to the table to a degree, because it's a little bit. I think there are a lot of technical founders who have built a product from the ground up that go, "I can do it all." When in reality, there are people that are far better at doing pieces of that than you are, and really need to figure out how you can cut that up into roles that cut up what you do into roles that other people can do well, so that you can outsource that and let it go without,
absolutely.
micromanaging.
Yeah, sure. Well, since we started talking about the team, I mean, you've got this unique kind of case scenario. Your co-founder is also your wife. So how do you manage the work-life balance? Because I want to remember correctly, you also have 4 kids?
We have 4 kids, yes.
You have 4 kids. Okay, so recently I've been talking to founders that are like 2 successful businesses, families, 4 kids, 2 kids, full-time jobs. Like, where do you get the time? But we'll get to that. But anyway, your wife is your co-founder. How do you balance that out? And is there any values that through your partnership you also project onto the company culture?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. So this is the most common question we get asked by every person who finds out that we run a business together.
Yeah.
So where to start? In general, so in terms of the whole work-life balance thing, I think that's the crunch of it is, we've obviously got 4 kids. We're actually, this is news for the podcast. We're expecting our 5th.
Okay.
And they're all boys. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a lot of boys.
There could be like a dad joke about a football team, but not there yet.
We're with a full basketball team. I'm happy with basketball.
Okay.
Anyway, I think one of the things for us is because we set out to start the business together, and we've got quite complementary skill sets. So inside the business, I think it works really, really well. Diony is very operationally minded. She's very good at people management. She's our COO. She's a CFO essentially as well. She does everything tax, legal, compliance. She's very on top of it all. And I'm obviously on the other end very product and kind of growth marketing focused. So we have natural remits inside of the business where it's kind of very clear whose turf is whose turf. And that doesn't mean that we don't have input on each other's remits, but we know when it's their decision to be made, and and we can just have input. So that's always worked really, really well. In terms of how it breaks down, I suppose on the day-to-day basis, I think because we're both in the business, we kind of actually get around a lot of the tensions that a lot of, I think, early stage business founders have with their spouse of like, are you spending too much time working? You're thinking about the business all the time. What about me? What about the family? Because we're both in it, it just means that everything's kind of integrated. It means we go and grab a coffee and we talk about the business and the kids, and we talk about, everything's just all mixed up together. There's no real life, right? There's no like 6:30 phone down. We don't talk about the business after that or anything like that. It's just like any time of day at any place, we could be doing either of those things. It works particularly well because we're a remote first business, so people generally work from home. We do have an office at the moment, but it's very rarely used by anyone. And that gives us, a whole bunch of flexibility. Half of our team are dispersed around the world, so that means if it's 10 o'clock in the morning and we've got to take the kids to swimming lessons, we just do that. There's no real problem there. So we have life very integrated both ways. If you called me at 10 in the morning any day, there's a very good chance I could be doing something very family-ish, or there's a very good chance I could be doing something very work-ish. And the same is true for Diony.
Okay. Yeah. So how does that translate into the team, and especially in the fully remote team? Because again, kind of a hot topic lately. Can you actually install culture in the team, in the company, or is it just kind of there and it's good or it's not? But you do create the baseline and you kind of have the guidelines, but otherwise, it just it grows as a society.
Yeah, no, I think we were actually really intentional with our culture. So because we started with just the two of us and we established how Paperform ran, we were remote first from day one. We work largely the same way we worked, first year in the business, in terms of lifestyle. But because we did that, and then we extended that to our employees as we hired them with the expectation that, yes, you've got a set, formal contract of hours to achieve, but where you achieve those, when you work, you should really organize to suit you best. As long outside of like, we have set hours for meetings or a few core hours overlap. So we've offered that kind of flexibility to our employees from day one. And I think by offering that, it's really, it attracts the right people to a degree. So a lot of the culture setting, I think, happens in the interview process, the kind of things that people are interested in that make them apply for the job, make it really apparent if they align, with the way we run the business. Generally, the problem we have with our employees is when you're responsible for managing your own time, it's easier to overwork than to underwork. So it's actually going, no. Just because I'm responding to a Slack message at 7:15 at night doesn't mean you should be. So making sure we set up mindful systems so that we don't put any pressure on people to work the way we do as well. Because some people do just want to turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning and clock off at 5 in the afternoon and say, I'm done.
Right.
So yeah, it's something we've worked really hard on. And then I suppose in terms of general company values, so we actually have a full set of company values on our about page, and this is where we take our employees through day one at Paperform. But a lot of the values that were written down are really just Diony and I's personal dynamic that we've had to vocalize to each other and then vocalize to the team of saying these are things that we actually really appreciate in the way that we work together, that we think actually represents how our team should work together. Things like arguing well is one of our core values, like not hearing criticism as a personal attack, but as a grounds for something to work together towards. Yeah, anyway, look at our about page. They're all there.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like it's very, it's core to have just kind of a very clear expectations of what you want to achieve. And for example, at SaaS Group, we have people manuals. So you go to your team and we're also rapidly growing. So how do you know who you're working with and how to work with them? You just go to Notion page and you read through like when to approach them, where they're based. Like, I'm in Vietnam, you cannot really reach me in the afternoon in Germany, right? I'm just never going to respond. I'm sleeping. So like, so that you don't set wrong expectations of people and just not running around thinking something's wrong, or something's not working. Okay, well, a couple more questions. First one, I wanted to ask you for a hack. Any kind of hack that you are using for your business, for your time management? That's very that's very interesting. For hiring, how you motivate maybe people to come work for you. Something that might be not very conventional for others, but your go-to thing.
Yeah. I think actually carrying on from that previous question, it's kind of our biggest hack in hiring, quite frankly, is the fact that not only do we have these, those kind of standard remote business perks of you can work from home, but because Diony and I live them and we publicly live them inside of our company. Like if you go to our random channel in Slack, there'll very well be a picture of our kid's latest drawing, like that we were doing at 3 p.m, or Diony and I going down to the beach.
Okay.
Like there's life integrated with work as well. Because we do that at work, it makes it much easier for us to sell that to people when we're interviewing. Our head of growth, Dave, we were talking about this the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, it's almost like when we're interviewing somebody, there's this one little thing in it, and it sounds kind of funny, but there's this one thing that if it comes up in the interview, we know we've got them." And it's like if they've got kids, as soon as somebody says they've got kids, it's like we've got them. They'll want to work here because we're in that funny dynamic where half of our team have young children. We're all in that state of trying to make this full-time work, this ambition, drive happen, and all at the same time as we're doing drop-offs, we're doing pickups, we're looking after kids, we're juggling sick days, we're it's all just happening for everyone all the time. So, and people love the camaraderie around that, and are willing to maybe take a job that's not as high as their ambitions may go, or we're not venture-backed level salaries or something like that, but it's a way better balance for where their life is at right now.
That's incredible. I think it's a great vision. Absolutely. I mean, parenting is stressful enough to just constantly tell your boss that, oh, there's something else, and worry that it's not going to fly.
I mean, as a vision at Paperform as a company is really, this is actually our formal company vision, is that we want to bring people from work back to life. And that's something that, we set out to achieve for ourselves, something we wanted to extend to our team, and really what we want to do for our customers as well. That's really the end game, is how can we just make your lives easier, and so you don't have to think about this at least this stuff anymore. You can go do something else that's important to you. I was going somewhere with that, but I can't remember where.
Well, that's perfect. But well, maybe you were announcing that you're hiring somebody. We can do that. It would be a great company to work for. But yeah, and one more question, something that everyone gets, the usual one. So far, what has been the biggest win and the biggest failure for you as a founder or for the company?
What has been the biggest win, sorry?
And the biggest failure.
What's been the biggest win and the biggest failure? Oh, look, I think we have won. I think for us, we set out with these ambitions of, we were sick of working for other people. We wanted to live life kind of on our own terms, be able to work from home, be able to have kids and see them while they're young. And that's been the biggest win, is we've got four kids, and we get to see them all day, every day. We get to live with them. We get to enjoy them when they're free as well. And we've really lived out that initial vision very, very well. There's obviously, the business has done very well and continues to grow, and there's lots of success on that side of things, but what it's enabled for our personal lives is clearly the biggest win.
It's wonderful.
Biggest failure is a harder one. Look, I think Paperform's our first business, and especially growing teams, it's something that we've really had to learn on the go. And I think we've made probably lots of small mistakes over the years around hiring the wrong person for the wrong role, not being clear with expectations, really just figuring out how to manage people well. That'd probably be where our biggest failures would be as an organization, but nothing so critical or that you can put your finger out and say that right there is our biggest failure.
Failure. Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, hopefully it stays that way as long as possible. I feel like you're doing such a great job. I mean, Paperform is a beautiful product, and by talking to you about the culture that you're building, it really speaks to me and what we're doing at saas group as well. Really great values. So thank you for telling this story.
Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see what other products you're going to put out there. So I will stay in touch. We'll creep around your and Diony's LinkedIn. But yeah, all the best with that, and happy to do it again sometime.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dean, and take care.